Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Awaken Your Souls Journey podcast. I'm Angela, and today I'm super excited to have with me Mike Martin. And Mike combines his extensive outdoor experience with mindfulness practices to create unique adventures that go beyond typical hiking. Whether you're joining one of his guided expeditions, listening to his podcast, or attending his speaking event, his goal is to help you discover the same healing and clarity that nature offered him. His approach is rooted in the belief that nature is our greatest teacher and healer. Through mindful interaction with the outdoors, we can find answers to our deepest questions, heal our emotional wounds, and rediscover our authentic selves, which I absolutely love. Nature was a big catalyst in my healing after I lost my husband. So I'm interested in diving more into what you do. And tell me a little bit more about, the name wilderness meditation probably is what it sounds like, but tell us more about what that really is.
So what that is actually it came about after a 60-minute argument with a counselor who brought up the idea of meditation. I'm like, that doesn't work for me. I'm not going to shave my head. I'm not going to go do all that stuff. And lo and behold, after that conversation, I went out back and I picked up my crossbow for my nightly archery practice. Realized, all right, you're right. I did everything. I'm doing everything you just talked to me for an hour about, as far as breathing techniques and controlling your thoughts and all the basic parts of meditation. So it clicked with me. I liked it. But then I thought about it a little more. I'm like, sitting here in my backyard or, sitting in the house, people are going to probably judge me. So let me go to the place that I feel the safest. And that's out in when I'm hiking in the wilderness. So then I just started kind of sitting around meditating and having these different experiences. And that was actually the catalyst for learning how to tame my depression, tame my anxiety, and really rewrite my whole journey.
Wow. So when you were sitting in meditation, what kind of things started coming to you when you were doing that?
So, with the example with the backdrop that I had, as I was telling you before we started at the Indian Mound Park, sitting on top of that earthwork, this ancient burial mound from the Hopewell Indians, and meditating, I felt somebody was actually sitting next to me, and, staring across from me, kind of poking at all these different things internally that I knew were there that I didn't want to deal with. And through that meditation, I learned, or at least gained the ability to put them down. Mother Earth beneath us is there to support us. And part of that is taking the things that we can't carry any longer so that we can grow and we can do all those things. And I tie it a lot to the idea of stewardship, because in hunting and in a lot of outdoor activities, we think about the carrying capacity of the land. Well, we've all got an invisible backpack that's only going to hold so much. And the more that gets collected there, the more it becomes our voice, the more it becomes us. And when we're aware of that and we look at what we can gain from it, we complete all the different steps to be able to, to let it go. That's when Mother Earth comes in and take it away from us.
Mm. Because I think lots of times we feel so alone in that journey. We have all these emotions that are coming up, and some of them are quite powerful. And sometimes we just don't know what to do or who to seek out. And so having Mother Nature as your nurturer and the one that can help you through that is a beautiful thing because she's there. She's right there.
It's funny, she's everywhere. You can't get away from her, even in the house. There's still the floor beneath you, and everything that the house is built in or built of came from Mother Nature. And, there's a second side to that relationship, and that's being active, being an active participant, not just pawning all the things off that you don't want to carry no more, but it's also learning. not just from the events that you've been through, but the environment around you.
Okay, so expand on that a little bit more. Maybe give an example of that.
So, to get back to my depression and my anxiety, for a long time, I carried those and I just masked them. I wore a mask to hide from it, to get away from it. And then I came to this point where I couldn't do that anymore. I smacked into a wall. So it was time to actually understand that the label of the depression that somebody put on me, the label of suffering with the anxiety somebody else put on me, those were just words. What it really comes down to is the vocabulary that you're using with yourself. You can either draw that from somebody else or you can look internally and find your strengths, but also come to understand your weaknesses and learn how those two can combine in order to keep balance within your journey and keep you ultimately putting one step in front of the other when things are difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But, and through that, when you finally get to a plateau, you get to enjoy the sun. You get to enjoy the sunrise of the beautiful times because you've gone through all these different things and you've worked through to really understand who you are.
Wow, what you're just saying there. So this is how I define the grieving process is very similar to what you're talking about. It's that these emotions come up and they're part of the process and they all have messages for us and things for us to learn. And as we move through that, we start to let those things go and we start to recreate or find our authentic self through that, our own identity, because it seems like we attach our identity with the things that, the mom, the wife, the job that you have, the place that you live, we attach ourselves to those things and then we kind of bury our authentic self in that. And so I noticed when I lost my husband, uh, it was so shocking. I didn't know who I was anymore. If you asked me what I wanted, I couldn't tell you what I wanted. It was just, it was almost like starting over with a blank slate and rediscovering who I was. And it sounds like you've got, a very similar process that you go through with people, because I know you work with people. Tell us a little bit more about that, like how you work one on one.
Well, actually, it's kind of funny because I just did a meditation group last week where we were talking about grief. Somehow we stumbled onto it, and there's so many different forms of it that we don't want to acknowledge because it again makes you go on this whole different direction of your journey. But I do the meditation classes as a group. I also do one-on-one meditation, through Zoom or in person if you're in the area. My favorite though is getting somebody out on the trail, especially the first time. Somebody that's been curious about it, and they're like, maybe come to a class and they realize that they like the meditation, the setting and that. And now I want to go out and actually get on the trail, but I'm kind of scared. And at that point, it's fun to use like probably the greatest piece of encouragement or advice I ever got, which was sometimes you just don't need to know. And for me, my personal journey and the reason that I'm even doing this is I literally built myself back up from the ground up, one swing of a hatchet, one footstep at a time. So getting to do that with somebody else and see the outcome of it, it's a very fulfilling thing.
Yeah, when we help others, it's very healing for ourselves. That's for sure. Yeah, yeah, I find that as well. I was going to say, I had an experience with a shaman down in Sedona, and he had taken me out along a river and was playing his drum. And that experience, I can't tell you. I can't tell you what that did, but all I know is how I felt when we were doing that and how it changed me and my whole perspective on life. It was just a really profound experience when I was so in the depths of despair. And I really think it was, a lot of the nature around me, the running creek, the trees, the sun, the hills, all of it.
That's exactly how I encountered it. I mean, as a kid, I used to chase my grandfather around, right, on all his outdoor adventures. And then he had a massive stroke, so that changed the game there.
Hmm.
Toward the end of his life, I got back out and I started thinking I was chasing, just that connection and those memories with him. But in reality, it was the precursor to going inward and really understanding that the different things from that we experience that we label under grief, they're simply transitions. You look at a tree in the cycle of the year, the way that in the spring it buds, summertime it holds its leaves, the fall it lets them go. And then in the wintertime, there's growth. And all that just naturally ties together. When you look at it from that perspective, a lot of the time we struggle with relationships because we're afraid of the grief part. We know everything's got to come to an end. But when you put that word cycle in there instead of end, it becomes a lot easier to process, a lot easier to understand and enjoy and realize that, these people that come in and out of our lives that we have to at some point grieve one way or the other, they come in to teach you something. And that's what life is all about. It's just constantly being the student.
Yeah. Yeah. What a beautiful thing. And it's interesting, after you lose a spouse, like I did, um, it's almost a little bit scary stepping into a new relationship and thinking that you could lose that person too, right? There is that thought that crosses your mind because there was so much pain that was involved with that. But when you talk about, the cycle and the process, and I mean, I guess those of us who have lost a spouse, we've been through it once. And so we know that letting go is a process and that it is very doable, that you come through it with a lot of gifts and a lot of wisdom on the other end of it. And so there is growth, like you say, there is growth that comes from that and healing and opportunity for something new again. But it's hard when you're in the depths of despair to see that.
Well, actually, I'll tell you what, this part of my journey started out after a divorce, and going through that grieving process was if I wasn't on a trail or I wasn't trying to mosey my way through my job, it was hiding in a tent somewhere. That went on for probably about 3.5 years. And finally, I decided to zip that tent up and actually walk around in the concrete world, try to re-engage with somebody, and meeting probably the most wonderful person I've ever met. So there is hope out there, regardless of what that grief looks like you're dealing with. There's something better on the other side.
I love that message because that is definitely what kept me going, was a message of hope that I could be okay again, because it felt like I couldn't be. It felt hopeless. It really did. And so just your message of hope and people hearing that. And the other thing I want to address is, people will look at that and say, well, how do I meditate in nature? Like, how can I do this? For some people who have never done it, it sounds so difficult. What advice would you
That
have for them?
that's the funnest question because actually meditation, one of the stigmas that we have is that it has to look specific way. But in reality, it's a practice that is totally in tune to you. It's unique for you. So just simply walking out to a park, sitting down on a bench, and just being present, focusing on your breathing. That's really the simplest way to get into it. And then, as you start actually hiking, you start practicing walking meditations, which is just being present and feeling the sensations of your body moving, along with focusing on your breathing. And the more that you practice it, the more you get comfortable with it, the more you find what works for you.
Yeah. And I think it's about taking that step and just trying it because you can't really explain the experience. Like I said with the shaman, I can't tell you.
Exactly.
It's just you will have your own personal experience with that. And it's magical, really.
It not only is it magical, it's fulfilling, it's renewing if you're open to it. It's also a good way to open up your creative side.
Yes. Yes. I believe that too. So when I'm in my favorite place, Cypress Hills, often when I go on these, I will call them meditation walks. It's a walk through the trees and to really kind of look around. And sometimes I look at the trees and kind of see if they have messages for me or if there's anything out there that might want to come in. But what's profound for me is the animals that will come closer and closer, and the birds, the deer, the squirrels. And it's just so amazing when you can just sit still and just be with them. And, well, obviously, you've had an experience like that.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, I just released my first book. It's a going to be a four-part series based off of different animals and the lessons you can learn. This one just happens to be based on the groundhog, which, through burrowing and spending most of its time down underground, it gives itself the opportunity to have boundaries to protect itself. And if you were to actually go through and meditate and think about the process, you can start teaching yourself to be more comfortable with putting up positive boundaries, as well as, when somebody crosses it, what it is that you should do with it. And a lot of this is based off of the old Stoic philosopher Seneca and his writing about how you should always be evaluating the day, the events, the people, and everything else that's involved within your day. Put it up for honest review and really think about whether it's serving you or it's not serving you. And if it's not serving you, again, Mother Earth is there to let it go. But the next one is actually about overcoming anxiety, which revolves around a personal story of mine and one of my spirit animals, the deer. When we go out hunting, we tend to get out there crazy early for everything to reset and the animals to start moving around and everything. And the goal is to sit there and be as still as you can. There's a, there's something negative that happens if you get seen. Obviously, you don't get to shoot at your deer. So when you sit out there and you let go of that judgment or that negative aspect, you can open yourself up to some very special things. A few years back, I was standing in a tree line and I had stood there all morning. It was cold and miserable. And this young deer had come through. I'd never seen him before. And it was on November 15th, the height of the deer breeding rut. So if I haven't seen a deer before, I won't shoot on it. So I'm standing there thinking about it. I call myself a hunter, but I'm not shooting. So what am I doing? And then my heart started to kind of flutter a little bit with the anxieties that I've been struggling with. And I thought about how projecting them onto Longhorn, as I named him, here actually lives in a game of life and death, right? If he makes a mistake, he's on the dinner menu for everybody. But he still put that aside because he has confidence in himself that if he encounters danger, he can get out of it or defend himself, whatever he has to do, so that he can still do his job. And with anxiety, it feels like life and death, but it's really not. And when you put yourself in the shoes of Longhorn and you realize that we've still got that confidence behind us, no matter what's going on in our head, we can get out, we can do those jobs. And that's been one of the most critical things that I think I've really applied from any of my outdoor experiences is overcoming that social anxiety through that.
Mm, wow, that's an amazing story. Yeah. And we can get so many messages from animals. If you go online and, if you see a particular flock of birds and you go and look, there's always messages. For a long time, I heard the mourning doves singing outside my window, always, always, always after Blaine died, especially when I was writing in my journal. And I looked up the messages for those, and they were profound for me and really brought a lot of comfort and healing. And so just being aware of, what's around you, like you say, and seeing what has meaning for you and maybe what doesn't.
The biggest part, though, to me is just being willing, being open to stepping out and seeing these things through a new perspective, almost like a childlike kind of curiosity.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So tell us more about your book or books.
So I just recently released the very first one, which is The Groundhog's Wisdom Personal Guide to Growth and Spirituality. And that gets into all the different aspects of what a gopher does through the day. He's so much, or a groundhog, he's so much more than just that weather predictor that one day of the year. We can learn not only the boundaries, but we can learn how to allow ourselves to have comfortable space to grow. And those are some of the biggest takeaways that I help people with. In fact, it's funny because the book actually, I ended up writing this one and getting going and writing a meditation for an upcoming class. I was like, you know what, I got so many notes here. This will be cool. It'll be fun. And then, part two is going to be out later on this spring. That's going to be about anxiety, overcoming anxiety through the eyes of a deer. And then the books three or four will be out later on in the year.
Very cool. So where can they get your book?
So I'm still learning the self-publishing process right now.
Okay.
The
Yeah.
easiest way is to swing over to my website, projectmindfulloutdoors.co, and just click the gopher there or the groundhog right there, and it'll take you over to the site.
Okay. And repeat for us your site again.
It's projectmindfulloutdoors.co.
Okay. Perfect. And I encourage people to go there and check out all of your resources and your workshops and everything. Do you have any final advice or parting words before we go?
So I think I'm going to tap into Daniel Boone on this one because you're never truly lost. It's actually how I start my podcast out. We get turned around in the woods for 5, 6, 7 days, whatever, but there's a magnetic pull within your heart that's always going to bring you back where you're at, where you're supposed to be. So
Mm,
even when you feel lost, you're standing where you're meant to be at the time because there's a lesson to be learned. So I encourage people to engage with that area, with that wherever you find yourself, and take those lessons. And most importantly, whether you make a good decision based off of where you're at, or you end up making a wrong decision, the decision doesn't define you. You're working through things in real time with the resources that you have and the vocabulary that you have.
beautiful. I love that. Yeah. And that really brings us back into that whole present moment and just being okay with where you are and what's happening now and knowing that it all has meaning. I love that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for taking the time today to be here and to share everything that you've learned through your work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time to celebrate my work with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks everyone for watching. And bye for now.